Welcome to today's live stream about Jenkins LTS 2.289.2. It was released this past Wednesday. That was June 30th. Hey, there were two releases in June. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in Mark Waite with us today. Mark, how you doing?
Great, Darren. Thanks.
It is Friday. If you're watching us live, it is the Friday before July 4th in the States. So why are we still here, Mark? Why are we not already gone?
Because the bank holiday doesn't happen until Monday.
Oh, right. That's the reason why we're still here today. So, new LTS. Second one in June, even though it's now July.
Right.
That's a little odd, but not odd, right?
Right. The release cadence is every 4 weeks. And sometimes you get a case where, and it's pretty rare, but you get a case where a 4-week period stays within a month. So the last LTS 2.289.1 was very early in June, and 28 days later, we just barely stayed inside the month of June.
That is right. And it was released early in the day, so if you really wanted to stay close, we could have released towards the end of the day. Of course, it was probably the first already in Australia when it was released.
I would bet so.
Yeah.
Although all sorts of interesting complications with this one because it was a security release. And so the actual construction of the release probably happened several days before. Daniel's very careful with those kind of things. He makes sure everything's ready. He makes sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed before he makes it publicly available.
Yep. And by the way, that's Daniel Beck that Mark was referring to.
Right.
For people that haven't joined us before, usually what we do is a couple days after the LTS release, we give it a day or two to bake just in case, because usually release days are busy. Just like in your life, your release days are probably busy. So we usually wait a day or two, and today is the second day. And for the people that have never joined us before, Mark, what makes the big difference, or what is the big difference between a Jenkins weekly release and the Jenkins LTS release?
Sure. So Jenkins long-term support releases are selected about every 3 months. We choose a base release, and that base release is a weekly release on which we will base the long-term support release. For the then 3-month period, we release a .1, a .2, a .3, focused on the stability of that release. That stabilization helps us give LTS a greater sense of consistency, a greater sense of stability, and lets users trust that, hey, they only need to upgrade roughly once a month if they choose the LTS release.
And that's it. Mm-hmm. It's that simple, right?
It is.
It's always that simple.
Yep.
Why make that kind of thing hard? Now, again, we're talking about 289.2 today. I'm trying to find my notes here. Make sure I got the right screen. There's so many screens today. That's not it. That's the show notes. Wow. Okay, I'm having a hard time reading today. Why is that? Okay, there we go. I could play, old person cards, but I'm not going to do that today. Okay, here we go.
Hey. Let's not. We don't use the O word. My children mistakenly use it, and I have to regularly reprimand them. They are not allowed to use the O word.
Seasoned. We're seasoned.
That's right. Experienced, mature. There are many euphemisms for that word.
Okay. Here's what happened in 289.2. Now, you did mention, and that's the first bullet, there was a security release associated with this one.
There was, and my perception of the content of the security advisory was it's not as dramatic as some security advisories have been for Jenkins Core. Yes, it includes some important changes, and those important changes are certainly interesting, but I think there are some other things in the backports that we may want to discuss. Do you want me to touch on security first here, or what would you like, Darren?
Whatever you would prefer. We can do whatever you want.
Okay, well, so then let's talk to security since it's here and visible.
Okay.
So there are 2 changes here in Jenkins Core. What you see on the list there is Jenkins Core plus 3 plugins received changes. And the core changes, first was that we had a mistake that allowed someone who had read permission but didn't, or let's see, who had cancel permission but did not have read permission, they could cancel something they could not read. And logically, that doesn't make sense. If you cannot read it, no matter whether or not you have cancel permission, you should not be able to cancel something you can't read. So the fix makes sense. The fix is reasonable. I think it's relatively narrow focus for people who do this kind of sophisticated permission management. I certainly am not managing my Jenkins server with that level of permission details.
Right. And the big one to me really was the second one, which is the session fixation one.
Right, and now this one could be much more important to people, though I like the phrasing that it uses here. This allows attackers, so while this vulnerability was available, it allowed attackers to use social engineering techniques to gain admin access. And so my sense of that hints that it probably requires access to the user's web browser that you're trying to spoof, and thus the social engineering techniques phrasing is usually what that means. Now, I am not a security expert, and so my hunch is this one is difficult to exploit. Daniel Beck did not highlight, oh, this is a must disaster kind of thing. It was just, yes, this is real. And what they did is at login, we now invalidate any existing session. Note that this one has an escape hatch in it. If you look at that note section there, the Jenkins security team is very conscientious about trying to assure that if they have to make a change that they feel might risk compatibility for users, they will commonly insert an escape hatch that will allow users or administrators to turn on a configuration flag that will short circuit, or in this case, provide an alternate implementation or disable the fix entirely. And those kinds of techniques assure that a user can confidently upgrade their LTS to 2.289.2, and if they find something broken from this session fixation fix, then they can disable the fix using this special Java property.
Yep. And I do want to go ahead and call out as well on the upgrade notes. That is also called out here with more details than are even provided in the advisory. So,
and
issue.
Good counsel. People should read upgrade guides. We try to keep them sparse. We try to keep them crisp and concise. But when things are written in the upgrade guide, it's almost always worth your time to read the 1 or 2 paragraphs written there.
Right. Okay. I know I threw us off what we were planning here, and we don't have to go through the plugins. It's just a couple of just normal type fixes. So, CSRF, XXEs, just the normal security type things. Nothing real surprising.
Right, and these particular plugins aren't huge installation volumes either.
Right.
So the likely blast radius or the impact zone from those plugins is smaller than, say, if we had to fix a security issue in the Git plugin or in the pipeline plugins.
Yep. Okay. Let's go ahead and go back over to the changelog. Get us back on schedule here. I messed up. Sorry. So the update to Winstone. Now, some people may know that Jetty is under the hood for a war installation, or did I say that? Close enough to correct.
Yes, you did.
Close enough to correct.
Exactly. Yep.
But it's not really Jetty. It's not raw Jetty. So this has always been interesting to me. There's actually this thing called Winstone. Can you talk a little bit about Winstone and why it's not just raw Jetty?
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not sure I'm clued in. That's a good question.
Okay. Well, if you can't, that's fine.
I believe that Winstone provides a wrapper around the Jetty HTTP, the Jetty web server, and that Winstone wrapper is what Kosuke created as a way to make it more convenient for his development in terms of Jenkins. I assume it implements things like life cycles, so that we can do restarts, that kind of thing. But I confess I haven't checked.
Yeah, there's the release. So bump the Jetty version, pretty quiet type stuff. So.
Yeah. And this one is one of those reminders to me that open source in general tends to stand on one another's shoulders, right? And the metaphor, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We are so grateful to the Jetty project. They maintain an excellent component, and we're very grateful for what they do. They've continued evolving and reliably carrying this component forward, and we regularly update to it and are grateful for it.
Good. We've got a comment here real quick. I want to go ahead and pull that up. Just updated our Docker deployment of Jenkins to this new LTS. Thanks for your work on these videos, as they're some of the most informative about Jenkins. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and
We
Darren,
appreciate
I
that.
confess I'm very grateful for your videos. I've gone ahead and posted several of them into the Jenkins documentation, and I look forward to adding more. Keep doing it. The community appreciates your work very, very much.
By the way, if there's things you're wanting to have done, send them to Mark, and Mark can get them to me. Or you can
Yeah,
see it.
that would be fine.
Because I have a list, but I always like to do what people want to see. So anyway, let's get back to Winstone. So Winstone update, all good, right? No big deal. Xtreme, boy, let's go back to the unfork of Xtreme. Look at this, just nice and flowing, nice and easy.
Right, isn't that a great story? Okay, the 2 and 3 years ago, even as much as just a year ago, when we were worrying about, there's a change in upstream Xtreme, do we need to bring that change into our fork? Do we need to fight with that fork? Do we need to decide who do we have to explain that the fork is still okay? Now, when a new release of Xtreme comes out, shortly thereafter, we merge it into Jenkins, and it just works. We are, again, deeply grateful to Jesse Glick for his amazing work on the unforking of Xtreme and paying back that technical debt.
Speaking of what appears to be soon to be technical debt,
yeah, okay.
This looks pretty interesting.
Well, it's certainly been interesting from a technical or exploration story. So the history of this one started with Daniel Beck realizing that there were some form submission changes coming in Firefox. And as far as I understand it, they still have not arrived, but they're coming. And so he initially began the process of reworking to support these updates. And across a series of changes, and it took us 2 or 3 steps, and work from several different people, including Thomas Grenier de la Tour, and I actually got involved in this a little bit, and we found several different subtle interactions that ultimately we discovered, this thing to adapt to Firefox actually touches more web browsers. So, for instance, my Chrome web browser was affected in some cases by this thing. And now we were delighted that this preparation for form submission changes did not actually harm anyone in 2.289.1. This, however, is just the next logical step in getting ready for this change that's eventually coming in a Firefox release. The other is that this was a point of pride for me. The form validation test automation that it mentions there was the first thing that detected the problem. And that's what you like to have stories for, right? Is you love it when test automation is the first warning bell that goes off. After 2 or 3 weeks, we found a way to duplicate the problem for a normal user in a web browser. But that was 2 or 3 weeks of exploring and understanding that people were investigating just because of the test automation. And so it was a great experience to have test automation lead as the tip of the spear in finding the problem.
It's always interesting when you're happy about your tests failing,
Yeah,
when they have been working.
Right, that's a rarity, but in this case, it was one of those places where we really, really liked that.
Good. Okay. I lost track of the notes. So there. What are the other ones you were? Oh, the redirect. Was that?
Yeah. So there were some changes here that are relative to user experience, and user experience in 2 of these in particular that, at least to me, matter. I've regularly hit this particular one. So prior to Jenkins 2.266, when I would be connected as the anonymous user, I would be on a page. If I then logged in, it would take me back to that same page. Beginning with 266, we inadvertently caused the redirect to take me to the root of the Jenkins application instead of returning me to the page where I'd been working. So it was just kind of obnoxious to me as a user, because my experience now was, where was I, and how do I get to that place back to that place where I was? This is now fixed, and so now when I'm anonymous, realize I need to make a change, and I log in, it takes me back to the correct page.
Right. Pretty simple. A couple of fixes for Mac OS if you're still running on Mac OS.
Right, and these are, again, these are predecessors to the one that I'm looking forward to. It hasn't arrived yet on the LTS. Similar changes will be coming for FreeBSD.
Right.
So we're looking forward to those. It's just good that we've got users on multiple platforms, and that we want to work well on those platforms.
Now this one was pretty interesting to me. Do not change the fonts. Was this one even found?
Yeah, so that's a fun example of, whoa, what happens when people are really good at exploratory testing? What happens when people are looking very carefully at how things are presented? So here they had clicked through the pages to find the artifacts and then switched to look at the artifacts in a tree view and realized, whoa, the font's changed on my setup. And again, users don't want their fonts to change, right? It's distracting. They're expecting that the experience remain consistent and that the fonts will stay consistent.
Yep. And I think this last one here we're going to talk about was this linkage error.
Yes, and race conditions in general are an interesting class of problem, right? Because a race condition may only be visible for certain subsets of the users. It may be dependent on timing, like processor that you're running, or file system that's backing your system, or amount of memory available and how much pressure that memory is under due to other things on the system. I, for instance, never saw this race condition, but when we've got a race condition, particularly that generates a linkage error, it's a good thing to get fixed.
Can you explain a linkage error?
If I remember correctly, what happens there is Java is trying to resolve a reference to a class and fails to do so.
Oh. Okay. Thus linkage.
I think so. Yeah, I'd have to double check,
Works
read all
for
the
me.
details, but it's that kind of, it's a very low-level Java operation.
Yeah. So this was a fairly, even though it's a security release, a fairly small release. Again, not unexpected for a .2.
Right.
We would sort of expect sort of the same thing with the .3 that will happen in 4 more weeks from now, or 3 weeks and 5 days. This is still looking pretty good, right? I mean, everything, 289 seems to be pretty happy. 32 happies, 5 each of the good or not so good.
Right. Well,
So-
and that's not bad if you scroll down just a little to 289.1. Let's
Yeah.
do a quick comparison. Yeah, so it's roughly similar pattern, right? So that's encouraging. And certainly we've seen challenges. For instance, that Winstone fix, we know there were users on 2.289.1 that were affected by it.
Right.
And it was not uncommon for them if they were, for instance, if I remember right, one of the conditions was if you were terminating your SSL in Jetty instead of using a reverse proxy and terminating it in Nginx or Apache, then that problem became more visible. Or if you were doing, I think one of the others was if you were doing very large form submissions, so you had a really big configuration for your cloud provider or something like that, it might have shown up there as well.
Okay. So that's pretty much it for this release, right? Pretty
It
quiet.
is.
Now, y'all had a big thing last Friday. Now, last week was CDCon, but Friday there was one more. Just one more thing, right? This pulling out the Apple thing. Just one more thing. What was last Friday?
Yeah, last Friday was the Jenkins Contributor Summit, and it was an amazing piece of work. So in the Jenkins Contributor Summit, we start with an opening session sharing the State of the Union. What's Jenkins doing? What's it done for the last period? And in this case, our previous Contributor Summit was in February. So what's it been like for the last 3 months in Jenkins? And our governance officers, our officers in general, so me, like documentation officer, Damien DePortal, representing infrastructure, shared briefly what's our status, how are things going, and what are we doing. So that 1 hour segment there, and then we split. We subdivided into a new contributor segment and an end user panel. And we had 3 different end users that for an hour, we're allowing our developers and our participants to ask them questions. They presented, hey, here's what I'm doing, and here are some of the things that I've been challenged by, and here's some of the problems I've encountered. So end user panel for an hour, and great experience. We're so grateful to Andre Babushkin, to Ioannis Matsosas, and to Ivan Fernandez and Victor Martinez, three end users of Jenkins in three very different spaces. In one case, it's a technology / semiconductor kind of space. In another case, it's microbiology and pharmaceutical development. And in another case, it's pure software development. Each of them had different and interesting things to share with us that help the developers be well-founded, well-grounded in deciding what they do with Jenkins going forward. So after those first 2 hours, then we brought on multiple parallel tracks on the technical side for contributor tracks. And so we had a segment on Jenkins Core talking about things like, what's the next step for Java 11? What are we going to do with the need to pay off some technical debt relative to old components like the Guava components that are inside Jenkins? How do we handle our terminology updates? How do we make those more effective and more efficient? That was one track, and so 3 hours of people discussing from around the world, what do you do with these questions and how do we approach them next? We had a good conversation there about plug-in end-of-life policy. Jenkins right now does not have a plug-in end-of-life policy. And what that's caused in many cases is there are times when we need to remove some capability, but our policy for compatibility has been so stringent that we've had to carry forward some really old, terrible baggage in order to not break compatibility, and that sacrifices our ability to do other capabilities for users, for the bigger community.
So that was Friday, last Friday. Have any of the videos for that been posted yet?
All of them have, yeah. So we've got video segments for the newcomer track, for the State of the Union, for the end user panel, and we've got subset videos for each of the tracks that did a recording. Some of the tracks unfortunately didn't record, so all we've got is their notes.
Right. And that would be over on the Jenkins YouTube channel, correct?
It is. That's correct. Okay. So there's even a dedicated playlist on the Jenkins YouTube channel for the June 2021 Contributor Summit. And so users could just go onto the Jenkins channel there, look at the playlists, and it should be ready for them. One of the top playlists currently on.
There you go. Okay. Anything else for today?
No, I think we could keep it short today, Darren. It's going to be Independence Day, even though my British friends remind me they do not recognize the holiday. I accept that, those rebels that they were in Boston and in New York and all those places, Virginia.
Yeah. Oh, well. Tough. Sorry. I could get into other things, but this is a family-friendly channel. So
right. We don't want to offend anyone. We just love our British colleagues and think they're great. But the fact that they don't recognize that's also charming. That's a lot of fun. Then again, I'm not sure they'd want us back.
Yeah, Toblerone and fish and chips.
There you go. Yes.
It's all good. All is forgiven. So, Mark, have a great weekend. I'm going to go ahead and kick Mark out of here. Thanks for joining us live today. If you were here with us live, go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the CloudBees channel yet, please go ahead and do that. Just click on the subscribe button, and then you can ring the bell. Anytime there's new content, I put out usually about 2 videos a week about Jenkins on this channel. So that way you'll be notified anytime those come out. And that's probably it. Again, my name is Darren, and we will see you again probably in about 4 weeks with the next release of Jenkins LTS. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you soon.